Well,
Guess I'll never
anyway,
know.
let's start the show. Welcome to the Four Corners. The Yeah, we're not gonna know. Welcome to Four Corners, the greatest. I think we're at least by semi-quarterly at this point, at this pace, podcast about the Denver Nuggets and the universe. I am your host, Ray. You can find me online at Rayvon Hackshaw. Joined this week by CT Phasio 24. What's going on?
Ray, Peter, how you guys doing? Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure.
Good, good. Got some rest. Appreciate you coming on as always. And I've got
Thanks for
Peter,
having me.
the well, soon to be deep north representative of the Nuggets universe. How you been?
Keep reminding me. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Ray. I'm a little sluggish today. Feeling a little bit like the Nuggets in second half of Game 7. My wife went back to work, which means I got to wake up every 2 hours to feed my son. But it'll all be worth it one day, when he's getting NBA paychecks. But other than that, life is good. Sun is shining. Nuggets, didn't go as far as we wanted, but we're in the contender phase. I feel like we're gonna come back strong next year.
Good, good. I'm an optimist myself. I think there's a lot of it doesn't this doesn't have to be the end for us as much as the internet might have you believe. So yeah, I think we can. Hmm. Actually, do you still have any like latent thoughts about the finals you wanna share?
Um, well, finals, yes, but let's save that for later because people are tuning in for Nuggets content. So everybody already knows what happened, but we'll do a quick recap of the season anyway, right? So Nuggets come into the season defending champions. They bring everybody back except Bruce Brown and Jeff Green and Ish Smith, and they basically have like the same regular season as last year, in my opinion. The defense was a little better. The offense was a little worse. Jamal missed some time, you know, and the rest of the West was better. That's honestly the bigger story to me. Is like the Nuggets really didn't play that differently, but the bench continued to be like subpar, and because the rest of the West was so good, the Nuggets couldn't rest in the second half of the season. Jamal gets back before the playoffs. Everything looks like it's going to be okay. Lakers series kind of a slog, but we get through it. And then Timberwolves series, not looking good at all after 2 games. And the Nuggets fight back hard, make some great adjustments, win 3 games in a row, including an absolutely all-time performance from Nikola Jokic in Game 5. I mean, they couldn't do anything with that man. Nuggets get blown out in Game 6, and all signs are pointing to an epic Game 7, with most people thinking the Nuggets are going to pull it out on their home floor, and they had a 20-point lead. Is hard to stomach, and the team just ran out of gas, flat out. And it's been a little over a week now, and it's a bummer, but I'm at peace with it. And Ray, I know you've had some time to recover and have yet to get your thoughts out. So, how you feeling right now, buddy?
I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling really good until you walked through the entire process. I'm just
That's what I do,
behind my
baby.
eyes of just pain.
I got to
Um,
get your juices flowing.
yeah. So, okay, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. It's hard for me
Like a
to say
disappointed
that.
father.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I would say. I wish the Nuggets were better. I think there are a lot of factors that have gone into them losing in the second round of the playoffs. Like, I don't think it's specifically this one thing, this one weird thing that happened to them. But what we could do. I could go through my list of who I blame the most.
Oh,
Or maybe okay, I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna alternate between who I blame the least and the most, and we're gonna work our way in. I'll say some positives, I'll give some criticisms, and we can all just move forward together as friends and companions in this like Nuggets adventure. So I'm gonna start with the person who I think that I blame the least, and I'm gonna say Nikola Jokic. I know that's a hot take. I'm sure you maybe
The
you guys
three-time
disagree,
MVP,
but I feel like
he's not to blame.
I mean,
I disagree.
yeah, okay,
Oh,
that's fair.
I
I'll make my
disagree.
case. The reason I'm not looking at Jokic with a lot of criticism right now is that like I still see him as a human being. Like I know he's that great that he can do anything on the basketball court, but I just feel like this year I think it was tough for him in the way that Denver kind of asked him to do everything on the basketball court, and I think that just wears on you. Could he have a playoff performances? I think he could have been better. I think he especially could have shot the ball better, but it's hard to shoot and rebound and defend and score 40 points and do that for 6 months a year. So Jokic, go get some rest, bud. You know. But okay, CT, tell me why Jokic deserves some amount of flack for the Nuggets' current Cancun-ness.
I think with Jokic is that I mean I think at the point now where we have to hold him to a higher standard. I think, and it's not a fair standard to have, just because he's
Mm.
so good and he's in conversations with some of the greats to play the game. I just think there was certain points of the playoffs where game two was an abomination against the Wolves. I mean, I think he almost like flat out quit the game almost. If you really want me to be honest. After that, I think he had moments like Peter said, like game five was really good. Um, like an all timer Jokic performance, but the three ball abandoned. I wrote in my article. If anyone hasn't checked it out, take a look if you want. I think Jokic just three balled, abandoned him in the playoffs. He only shot 26% from three. And a big part of beating Gobert and the Wolves' scheme was Jokic hitting threes, and he just couldn't hit anything. And in prior playoffs, he's been good from three. 35-ish plus. I mean, even if he shot like 30%, I think the Nuggets win the series from three. That's like the margin that they were at. And yeah, of course, I think Jokic and the minutes total has caught up to him over the years. You look at those teams without Murray and MPJ and all the heavy lifting that he had to do. Then coming off a championship run into this year where he had to do a lot of heavy lifting as well with Murray injured again. I think it kind of caught up to him. We saw that in Game 7. It's not really to excuse him a lot, but I do empathize with him about the load, the load that he's carrying on his shoulders. Um, but again, just him being the best player in the world, we kind of have to hold him to that standard of, he's got to be transcendent for the Nuggets to win. Especially considering the roster and who the Nuggets, who they have on their starting lineup and their bench. I just think Jokic has to be. Again, he doesn't have to be like Michael Jordan, but he has to be, display greatness. And I think more often than not in the playoffs, he was great, but there were some instances where I think the deficiencies, especially shooting wise, and sometimes the defense. And like I said, that game two and versus Minnesota at home was a really bad game. That kind of like rivaled the Utah series in the bubble, where they almost like quit. Before they went on the comeback to win Game 7. But yeah, I don't think Jokic is at fault, but I don't think he's blameless in the whole scheme of things. I don't think he can be, especially being who he is and that he's the best player on the team. I
That's
think
fair.
like he's
There are
I,
ways he
I
could be
think with
better.
Jokic too. Sorry, just one more thing. I think with Jokic is that a lot of people just like don't like to blame him for a lot of things. And it's fine because he's so good. Like I completely agree. But I just see on the timeline, like a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, Jokic, his teammates let him down or whatever." And it's just like, it's a team game, and it's true. Jokic is the best player on the team, but like I said, there's some things that transpired in the playoffs where I think we can attribute some blame to him for why the series went the way it did.
That's fair. As why, well, I think a lot of those are valid criticisms. Some of the sometimes I feel like he's too smart for his own good in this way, where he kind of sees the faults of the team,
It's a good point.
and if he doesn't feel convinced that I think they have it as a team, sometimes that almost demotivates him, where he starts to gear down himself, where he kind of is willing to he's willing to accept his fate, and I don't think anybody likes that, especially in the context of superstardom and comparing guys to top 10 greats and things like that. So, I mean, Peter, I want to throw it to you. Where do you land on the Jokic blame scale?
I mean, I think that like CT made some good points, but there's always like a tipping point, right? It's like, how much are you asking a guy to do? You know, he leads the team in scoring, he leads the team in rebounding, he leads the team in assists, and he's got to like hedge out on every ball screen. So the thing I want to address is the 3-point shooting, because like you mentioned, if he just shoots 30%, they probably win the series. He didn't shoot well from three. But if I'm being honest, guys, like I don't like when Jokic shoots a lot of threes. I don't think he wants to shoot a lot of threes. So what it makes me think of, was it game 7? He took like 10 threes. What was he, like 2 for 10 or something?
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
kept shooting.
Yeah.
yeah, he hit a couple late, but the game was already in hand. It's like, I think that when he shoots that many threes, it means one of two things. It either means he feels like he has to, or he's tired, right? Because if he's not tired, he's just going to go down low and body you and get a good shot every time. So I don't know if it was like variety's sake or if he felt like, because like there's one point that the announcers love to make. National announcers love to say, oh, if you hit a couple threes, now he's got to step out. Rudy Gobert doesn't do that. He's just going to play the same way every time. So if Jokic hits 2 threes in the first quarter, I don't think it like changes the Timberwolves defense. I've never understood that angle. I'd love your guys' opinion on that, but I just think if he makes his threes, yeah, they win, but like that should not be the recipe to win. If Jokic has to shoot more than 5 threes in a game, that's a bad sign.
Hmm. I generally agree. It probably means something has gone wrong. So
Yes.
there's a part of a reason
Yeah.
why he's so high on my like how much blame do I assign? Some, but like, is it a deeply disappointing playoff series? Somewhat. On looking at his whole year, I kind of understand where he is in that sense. But as far as the shooting and its impact, I think you know there's some of this effect with Christian Brown right now. CTM, what you think of this? That I think shooting is more about how much people respect you than it
Mhm.
is about what your percentage actually is. If you shoot 35%, but people really respect it, I think it means a lot more when even a guy who shoots 38%, 39%, but people don't respect it either because they don't believe in it, a la Draymond, or they just don't know you that well. I think Christian is going through that process of imparting upon people, oh, I probably should go out there because eventually, you're playing a game, you realize when your coach yells at you for a third time, hey, maybe put a hand up. I think players don't want to just ignore that, but um, yeah, coach. Is that what CT stands for? Are you Coach
No,
T?
no,
Oh, okay.
no. I mean, they call me Coach CT, my players, but
Okay.
um, yeah, actually, no one on the timeline's called me Coach before. I think that was the first. But yeah, no, I think too. I think with the whole Timberwolves debate, I was talking with Adam Morris on the timeline the other day. Um, like I think a lot of that was overblown, honestly, with like the whole, the Wolves are schemed to beat the Nuggets. I will agree with that. I just think the whole like process of like, oh, Tim was, gearing up for it, and because again, it proved to me that he was. I don't want to be too harsh on Tim, but he was like a uh, not a one dimensional GM, but he was more of a limited. He had a limited viewing of the Wolves in the fact that he couldn't build the team holistically to beat the Mavericks. You know what I mean? Like he beat the Sun, they beat the
Mhm.
Suns, which the Suns are just not a good basketball team. and then the Nuggets, which the Nuggets had a lot of flaws this year. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the next segment or whenever, but not having a capable point guard off the bench like Bruce was last year. And Bruce wasn't even a point guard. He was just a guy who he could get downhill and he could defend. He had positional size, right? The Nuggets didn't have a guy like that this year. There was not even like a replicable guy on the roster with that skill set, and that's why I was very critical of the Reggie signing, because Reggie overall I think played well this year. I think with Reggie though, his skill set wasn't um, wasn't needed for what the Nuggets had to do in order to win. Um, and I think that's where the problem really was. And if you look at the rest of the bench, Christian I thought was the best Nuggets bench player by a mile this year. I think the defense was great. I mean, especially on Anthony Edwards. I mean, he was the best defender on him, which is pretty impressive. Um, and you look at a guy like Holiday who played good in some games in the Wolves series, but then after that he like put up a goose egg in a couple games. So again, it's just like the Nuggets didn't have any contributors where it was like I trust these guys to fill in for some starters. And and I've been pretty vocal about my Vlatko support as well. Like I just think Vlatko would have helped this year. A guy who's a bigger body, physical, could shoot the ball, could pass. Nuggets didn't have a guy like that either in the front court. If you look at Watson, I mean, he got benched because he couldn't shoot after a while. And is Malone? I actually have thought about this. It was Malone right for benching him. I don't know if I could get there that he was correct for doing that. Looking back on it now, um, but yeah, I just think with the Wolves, it was just like the Nuggets kind of like from the championship to this year, their team was much more limited with flexibility and like options, like problem solvers. How I mentioned in my article, um, and I think that's why they kind of ultimately, made the Nuggets lose. So I think the Wolves are a bad matchup for the Nuggets, but I think the Nuggets they were up a game, game 7, they're up by 20 points. Like I don't think it was like something where it's like the Nuggets are so far from winning and trade the whole roster now and get Mike out of here and ship Murray to, Charlotte, So it's just they were right
Send them
there.
back
Just
to
the margin.
Canada.
The margins were
Yeah,
what lost them the series.
I agree. I mean, I do think there's a lot of. I appreciate what Tim Connolly did in the sense that he did build his whole roster to target what Denver does well. But I put there's like credit. Sorry about this new setup. There's credit for as what Minnesota did to disrupt Denver, but also I would put a lot in the basket of what could Denver have done to just approach the game differently. I mean, I just think about the way that
Right.
you would approach any matchup where like, oh, you are at a size disadvantage. Okay, well, a lot of times you play with more pace, you play a little faster, you shoot a little bit. I mean, they did shoot terrible from three, so I think there's some like offensive, maybe flexibility at least evaluation to be done. But
Mhm.
I don't want to take anything away from what the Wolves did. But yeah, I think what the follow up for them kind of showed is that like they're not a flawless team, and that
Right.
also to your point, the ability to really collapse a defense and to not fold to ball pressure either by what the Mavs are doing is like Luca is just so strong, the pressure doesn't matter, and Kyrie is so quick and so mobile, and he has the ball control that the pressure also doesn't matter. So there's two different ways of like it doesn't matter how you do it, but if you can collapse that defense, they are as vulnerable as anybody else. Just also shoot well. So I'm gonna summarize all that to say Reggie is in very kind of similar to Jokic on the year for me in that like I don't know what more you expected given the circumstances type of situation like Justin Holiday kind of a similar deal. Christian I thought was great to kind of get towards that midpoint. I mean, Peter, I don't know what do you have any thoughts about him? And this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but just in terms of evaluating a player, what did this year impart for you on Christian as whether he's a starter or just like a high level role player next year on the team, what his future is going forward?
I think that he's got all the pieces to be a competent starter. I think CT, I think you tweeted out either today or yesterday that he only played like 35 minutes with the other starters, and it was like plus
In
16.
place of KCP. Yeah,
Yeah,
place of
so
KCP.
it works. That unit's fine. What's going to happen, Ray, is if he ends up being the starter, is teams are going to leave him open. So is he going to have the confidence to become that 40% 3-point shooter that we need him to be, or is he going to, look to keep the ball moving and pass more and not take a lot of threes? So that's going to kind of determine his ceiling, right? Because I don't think he's going to get much better or worse in the rest of his game. I mean, I guess it's possible he could add some better dribbling and playmaking, but I wouldn't expect that, especially from a guy who's going to be asked to be like the guy that takes the other team's best player, on defense and is just kind of like a cog in the system. But no, I'm confident because he's just different, right? It's like if we lose KCP, obviously that hurts. And the place it's going to hurt the most is against the quick guards, right? Like KCP does a good job on the Steph Curry, Dame Lillard types, but CB's
Right.
bigger. But CB's bigger, so he does a better job on like Anthony Edwards, right? And on those kind of guys. So I still think the Nuggets could be okay. It just gives them less versatility. I think what's more interesting is if he's your starter, now there's a trickle down, right? Now Strother has to play. Watson probably has to play. One of those guys has to be consistent for you next year. And I'm not going to say like anybody's going to, say Watson was consistent this year, but he definitely showed flashes, and I think he took good steps. And he needs to have another big summer because he's still in the plans. I think he got a lot of run. It didn't end the way he wanted it, but hopefully he's got his head held up, knowing that like, hey, there's going to be a lot more minutes available.
Yeah, to kind of continue, that's a great jump off point for me because I feel I don't think Michael Malone did a bad job this year, but one of my frustrations with him, maybe just like criticisms, I wanted him to be around for a long time. I think we all
Mhm.
do. Is that these are guys who, if Denver is going to hold their window open, they do need that seasoning. So, for example, with Christian as a shooter, Grace mentions other starters, other team starters, not necessarily always being great shooters. I think, kind of to your point, Christian is doing pretty well. They shoot a pretty similar clip, but that if he gets more volume just on the league as a whole, maybe he'll start to draw that similar respect. I actually think that's more likely than not that teams see and recognize, especially because I think Christian is, for better or worse, the type of player NBA Twitter just loves to like love, I guess. Uh, that if he's shooting 38.5% next year, people might actually, but he's doing it with a little bit more volume over 20, 25, 30 minutes a game. He might get that respect and they would actually just be okay. They just be different. I think that
Yeah.
is fine. And to that point, Julian Strother kind of has to play, which I think that's good for the Nuggets project. If you want that long term sustainable success, if you want a dynasty, Julian, he's got to play. Like you need some
Yeah.
of these lower cost controlled contracts to work out, and that might mean you have to sort through. Bless you. You might have to
Excuse
sort
me.
through some of that, whatever growing pains that might be, whether it's people not respecting their shot or learning defensive rotations, which I think a lot of times you need reps for that. You got to get burned a few times to realize, you know, there's a back screen coming on this certain type of action or what have you. So, yeah, I hope Malone does that better. I mean, overall, still like him, not calling for him to be fired. I do think he's like, in the same way that this is the first back step for the team, this might be the first back step for him.
Mhm.
But he's not on thin ice, just not as like your ice can never be thicker than when you just won a championship. So it's hard to expect anything different in that way. But yeah, I
Well,
think he's doing fine.
Ray, can I jump in real quick? When you say thin ice, it's like people have
Hmm.
to remember this is pro sports. This is not like little league, everybody gets a chance. Like, yeah, the idea was for Peyton to develop this year, but once you get to the playoffs, it's winning time. So if he's not giving you what you need and you got to bench him, there can't be any hard feelings. Like, yeah, you're allowed to be pissed off, but it's like there's not a single ounce of my being that thinks that was a personal decision. That was 100% Malone business decision. Like, hey, this isn't working for us right now. I've got to abandon ship, even though we built up all this goodwill this year. And this happens all over the league every year to a bunch of different players. And it's not about one series. It's how do you come back from this now, right? Like this should motivate him to keep working. I think that Peyton has talked about how he loves being around the guys and how everybody's has a good work ethic. And I think he's on the right team. I think he really did get drafted into a place that believed in him. After, if we're being honest, what he did in college did not deserve a first round draft pick. CT, even
No,
though
not even
he
close.
has some skills. Like this was a leap of faith by Calvin Booth, and I think his work ethic is showing that it's paying off. But it's just one chapter in the book of Peyton Watson. So the fact that he got benched in the playoff series, yeah, it's not a good thing. But to me, it was never. To me, it was always like my first reaction was, "Oh man, that's a bummer. I feel bad for him." But it was never like, "Oh, I'm giving up on him." It's like he's a second year player. He'd be a junior in college right now, and if you can't play in the second round of the playoffs, against a contender, like that's not the end of the world. You can. He's going to be fine.
I would generally, yeah, I'm pro Peyton as well. I think a big thing is them playing going forward, whether it's Peyton or Julian or whoever it might be, getting them in situations where it just kind of makes sense for their skill sets. Whether that, however many starters you need to do that, or I think we'll probably talk about backup center and backup point guard conversations throughout the show. But him just being in a role that's going to make sense for him so he can build that confidence in that role so that when he does need to do it in the playoffs, they've got some reps there, whether that's Peyton kind of in the maybe in the Aaron Gordon role. I could see him doing that, or Christian in KCP's role, or Julian just kind of giving a spark off the bench. Let them get used to that. That's what I hope for Michael Malone. Um,
Yeah. I think just to add a
yeah.
little bit to that, I think Christian starting next year. I think Gray Smith has made some great points in the chat. I think with Christian, it's like he's different from KCP in the way that he's not as good offensively, meaning he's not as good of a shooter. I do think Christian brings a lot of different intangibles to the table. When you talk about his offensive rebounding, he's bigger than KCP, so I think he'll have an ability to guard more of the wings than KCP. I think KCP at times was a little bit undersized, but again, I actually like KCP a lot on like the Tatum if it would came to the finals again this year. Um, and then Christian's got to be offensively, just has to attack closeouts better. Teams aren't really they're closing out short to him because you can't, they're just testing his jump shot. Um, and I think with Watson too, I think Watson and CB playing next to each other, if it's not with the starters, is a problem. Just because like the offense is just really, really bogged down by them not being able to shoot. Um, but yeah, CB at the two is something I'm actually looking forward to. And like I put on the timeline the other day, he only played like 35 minutes on the whole year with KCP out of the lineup. And again, KCP was available a lot, so that's why that happened. But like we saw in the playoffs, and I wrote in my article, Malone couldn't find different lineups that he found the last playoffs. And obviously that was because of Bruce, but he couldn't go to a lineup. And it's not entirely his fault because I think obviously the roster is a bit worse than last year because Bruce was the playable six man. Um, but like Malone couldn't go to benching. Like let's bench Gordon in a game 7 for a little bit, and let's play 5 out and see how MPJ does to the 4, and let's see how KCP and Brown play in a more perimeter look. We just didn't see anything like that where it was like the options were limited in that regard. So I think moving forward for next year, I'm looking forward to seeing like a lineup where Strawler in place of the starters, right? In place of Mike maybe for a little bit, or place instead of if KCP's on the roster, or Brown if he's starting, right? I just want to see like 4 starters and a bench guy. I think that's better than Malone's hockey subs, where just like it was really like a detriment to the bench. I thought a lot this year, even though it statistically was better. I just think like as far as playability wise, it made them look worse than like trying to mix and match more starters. And I think next year too, like if KCP leaves, like all is not lost. I don't think. I think people are making a big deal about that because Jokic is still around. KCP is going to be missed because of his skill set, of course, but um, like a bench of Julian, Peyton, Flacco, and say if the Nuggets go get like a Chris Dunn or a Drummond, or say like a Goga Bitadze, I think that'd be pretty good in my opinion. Or like a Daron Holmes in the draft or somebody like that. I think there's like options here where if like the Nuggets could get a minimum guy or two, I think they would look a lot better. And again, that's a Booth question as well, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about coming up. Like I just think with Booth is that I like his idea with the 2 timelines. I do, because eventually, like we're seeing right now, KCP leaves, Brown could slot in, the lineup is still going to be positive, even though I think it's a little bit more limited offensively. But that's why he's drafting these guys, because eventually, if the Nuggets lose a Gordon or a KCP, these guys are going to slide in between Mike, Jokic and Murray, and we could kind of see how that operates without like the whole bottom falling out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I I almost don't even see it as like 2 timelines as much as I do one
Right,
continuous sort of pipeline of talent that you're going to be surrounding Jokic with, because Jokic is that flexible. I think
right.
there's so many guys. He made Mason Plumlee they're a great duo. Like he figured that out. So I think we can be a little bit more open minded about like who could or could not work with Jokic given the time and the reps and the sort of thoughtfulness maybe about what their role is supposed to be. And just different configurations for them that should be, I hope, just tested in the regular season. Just, hey, let's see how this looks, and it covers 2 different points there. It's the endurance for the starters. Jokic could use a night off sometimes. Gordon could use a night off sometimes. Jamal could use a night off
Right.
sometimes. That maybe you can get in a different sort of experience is that you could then have to pull out of the toolkit come playoff time. That would be really nice. And I would say for Calvin Booth, it's like having that they should be on the same page. Like that's a 2-way street. I've been really critical of Booth and even of Tim Connolly when he was here, between them and Michael Malone, about just them not being, it doesn't feel like they're always in agreement, whether it's Peyton or Bowl, going back to Bowl, or like a bunch of guys who come in and out of the building. Whatever they do, I hope that Malone is on board with that plan, whatever it might be. So yeah, I'm pretty new. I still trust him, but I think it's kind of like Malone. The ice is as thick as it could ever be right after a championship. So maybe it's not as thin. Maybe there's a little global warming, but this is a thick ice sheet. I feel pretty good about Booth to make whatever the right choice is in the draft. But
Yeah.
Peter, do you have any? I mean, I know you probably also saw like the interview that they did closing the year. I'm talking about with the executives and coaching staff and all that. Do you have any thoughts about either that interview or just Booth's position in general?
Yeah, I mean, I want to address like a lot of what CT said. I think Strother is a really important piece next year, and Booth pretty much hinted at that too. So did Malone. I think they both like him, which is good. Malone, he played him pretty early in the year to start, I remember. And the thing I really liked about him is just he's a quick decision maker. He's aggressive,
Yep.
and I loved him coming out of the draft because Gonzaga is such a well coached team, and no matter like how good or bad you are at the next level, how you play always translates, right? Make or miss. He didn't have good numbers, but, like, I thought that he was playing the right way, so to speak. Um, And I just think that when it comes to the bench in general in the NBA, it's not always like a 1 + 1 + 1 = 3 type scenario, because what I mean is somebody has to score, right? Somebody has to shoot. So this is kind of why I was always a Reggie Jackson defender, is like, what do you want him to do? Like he's there to score. That's why he was signed. Sometimes he's going to miss, but at least he's not afraid. And it's fair, CT, to say like he wasn't the exact type of player the Nuggets needed, but this actually brings me to a bigger point, and I would like to see if you guys, agree or disagree. I always hear that Kevin Durant is like the most malleable superstar. You can put him in on any team and like he can play well and the team will be good. I kind of think Jokic is hard to build around. Like I love Jokic. I think he's a great player, but
Mhm.
I think that they have specifically targeted players that play well off of Jokic. But once Jokic goes to the bench, they kind of don't really know what to do because the hub's not there. So that's
Right.
not Jokic's fault, but it's also like it's been years now since Malone has been able to figure out a good bench rotation, because if you just put a role player next to a role player next to a role player, it's not a surprise that they can't have a good offense, right, guys? So it's like they need Strother or somebody to step up and be like, I got this. And I have more faith in Strother becoming that bench scorer than I do Watson. Watson's just a different player. Like he's a good player, but he's mostly a defender, slasher, finisher. Maybe he'll develop the three ball. I'm still high on him, but I don't think he's the guy that you want to give more reps like with the ball in his hands. I think Strother actually showed ability to, catch the ball, and on DHOs, like he was getting into the paint a lot.
Yeah.
He had a pretty nice floater at times last year, and he's quick too. Like he's like CT. Can you just imagine if MPJ had Strother's footwork, like coming off screens and like knowing how to get open? Like he does this stuff at like an a 5-year veteran level. Like he reminds me of Rip Hamilton, like just the way he plays. I'm really hoping that translates to more baskets next season. But yeah, I mean the Booth approach is like, I was bummed out this year that we didn't get one more big body,
Mhm.
but at least we still have bullets in the chamber, right? We got a draft pick in the first round this year. We got a second round pick, and they'll probably be able to make a small signing or make a trade. So at least the Nuggets aren't stuck. Phoenix, they didn't win a playoff game this year, and they don't really have many options, guys. So it's like I still think the Nuggets are in good position, and it's just
Definitely.
important to note that like you can't panic, right? Sometimes you lose in the playoffs, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need wholesale changes. Like I've basically stopped responding to anybody online that's like wants to trade MPJ. I'm like, that doesn't solve
Every
anything.
day. Every day,
Yeah.
my mentions.
It's so annoying, and I'm just like, look, if you don't win next year and you want to shake things up, I get it, but this is not the time to make a major change, in my opinion.
No, no, no. Yeah, I agree with that. I think too. Um, I think Strawler's gonna have a pretty big year next year. Relatively, at least for what he's gonna be able to play. Um, I just think like he showed some flashes this year with Jokic, especially like in the pocket passes that he was making. He had initiating upside, I think, as far as a guy playing next to Murray. And again, I think there's limitations to that because defensively the backcourt isn't good. It wouldn't be great. Um, but I just do think like off the bench, and we'll probably get into this with the offseason like talk coming up. Um, I just think that the Nuggets have to prioritize signing vets. Um, I just think that the young guys, it's a good way to go. I'm a huge advocate of those guys. I'm a huge advocate of Strawler, Brown, and Watson. Then if they draft somebody else, if they bring in say like a Holmes or a Tristan Newton, um, I'll be in on on that approach. But I just think that this year, like the deck was cleared out way too much for the young guys, like the sink or swim basically. And like Reggie and Holiday and like those guys like weren't really threats like to really like knock them out of playing time, and that's some of his positional and things like that. But like if Vlatko was playing, I think he probably would have eaten into Watson's minutes a little bit this year. I think a little bit at least. Um, so I think like moving forward, like getting a vet or two to kind of like facilitate the young guys and like going like I said, not full on five bench, but say if you were to get like a Chris Dunn or a Dylan Wright, who I think is like more realistic options, and or getting like a Goga, Batadze, or a Drummond is like maybe, or like a Daniel Tice, right? Like if you get like two of those guys that are like I wouldn't say Bruce Brown level, but are like below that. But again, if you get a good backup center, maybe then it outweighs the Jeff Green factor. I just think the Nuggets just need two vet guys to be in the rotation, and then take your pick of Brown, Strawther, Watson to accompany that. I think Christian obviously solidified himself over the past 2 years, but I think like after that, like the Nuggets just need vets. You know what I mean? Like we're seeing in Dallas right now. It's every year it's a copycat league, right? And I think with the Mavericks, they have a lot of vets off the bench that are playing right now. Like Derek Jones was a minimum signing. I included in my article. Like the Nuggets could have signed a minimum guy, like Kelly Oubre, same thing for Philly, even though they flamed that early, but he had a good year, on a minimum deal. If the Nuggets could snag a minimum guy or two, that's better than a Reggie, and again, it's not Reggie's fault, but if it's better and more versatile than a Reggie, and again, the Zeke discussion is a whole other ball game. But if you get like more playable guys than what the Nuggets have currently this year, I think they're going to be worlds better. I really do. I think that like the talk is just overblown. I just think the Nuggets just didn't have enough. When it comes from a bench perspective, and then they were just gassed at the end of it. And that doesn't excuse their play, obviously, but I just think those are two big contributing factors to like what went on. And I think with Booth too, just another like quick point about Booth is that a lot of people are just discounting his year one on the job, like getting Bruce Brown, which again was malpractice by the league that no one else signed him, um, and like getting KCP in a trade for what he did, for what he gave up, like, and all respect in the world to Will Barton and Monte Morris, but look at those guys now. I mean, Monte's a borderline rotation piece, and Will Barton's out of the league. KCP's a $20 million a year starter. That's a heist of a deal that he got. Um, and people were like, "Oh, well, Tim Conley had it lined up before he left." He didn't get him. He didn't get KCP before he left. Booth got him in the deal. So I have to give Booth that credit, and he got Bruce. Again, and he drafted Christian. So those are three moves in
Yeah.
the first year that automatically, for me, give him some leeway right now to let's see his plan out a little more. Again, if he doesn't sign a veteran, I'd have said this recently lately. If he doesn't sign a veteran point guard and he brings in Jalen Pickett to be the backup point guard, then I'll be very critical of his approach. Because I just personally scouting Jalen before the draft, I wasn't high on him. And same with Hunter Tyson. I just think that was like an overpay as far as their deals and guarantees were concerned. If those guys are in the rotation next year, like if Pickett is the backup point guard, then I'll be critical of the plan. They just need a veteran guy. They need a Chris Dunn. They need Dylan Wright. I'll take Reggie back before Pickett's the backup. I just think that's where they're at right now.
Mhm.
With you.
Yeah, I would say a big thing is I think it's not that I'm out on because I could there's a universe, I think I'm an optimistic person. There's a universe where I could see a Hunter Tyson or a Jalen Pickett playing somewhere, but it's not a guarantee. And if they're gonna be here and you're gonna have them here on those sort of longer term deals, they need to be they're there to at least eat minutes. And if they can't at least eat minutes, I don't really see the point in what they're so like all of the young guy process that's important. So looking ahead, I would like to see like I would love a young backup center. I like Deron Holmes a lot, and I've mentioned him. But in that kind of a case,
I think we lost
like
Ray.
an Andre Drummond. That
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there he's back.
am I back?
You're back.
You're back.
Okay. I think if we okay, third time's the charm. Whether it's backup center or backup point guard, having a young guy who can eat minutes and hope develops to some degree, I think that's healthy. But I think particularly at those positions, a couple of veterans would really be nice because even if the young guy is playing, then at least it's because he's up to a certain threshold, that he's not there just because it's a default thing, if that makes sense. So I hope they can figure that out and they don't have too many young guys at one particular position. Just like spread it around a little bit and hopefully two or three of them hit. I'm okay with that. And if not, then you have a veteran to come in and step in. Um, yeah. Speaking of second units, though, I got to climb the ladder in my blame game. And
I was about to say we've gone
let's go
45
to
minutes
Aaron
and you
Gordon.
haven't talked about the second best player on the team yet and his part
No
in how the
negatives.
season went.
We're working our way from the positive to the or the least negative
Oh,
to the
that's
most
right. I'm
negative.
sorry. We're a
And I'm
we're a
gonna
long
say,
form podcast.
yeah. I want to touch on Aaron Gordon's season a little bit, just in the sense that I think he was another guy who maybe he didn't have the best playoffs, but I also feel like the circumstances were more harmful to him and his play, especially, than I think was his effort necessarily. He's getting a little bit older, and that's going to be a continuing sort of thing for him. But Peter, I'm kind of curious. How would you judge maybe his overall year, along with his playoffs, if you feel like those things are particularly different?
I mean, I thought he was more or less the same player he was last year, which is good enough. Good on defense, not great. I mean, he didn't make like all defensive team or anything, which I think is fair. That was the shortest layoff he's ever had. He's never made the finals before, but he still did good enough for us. Decent rebounder. Shot the three ball worse this year, but I don't really count on him for threes. And then he started making them in the playoffs, which was kind of a nice bonus. Um, but he just had nothing left in the tank in that game 7, man. And that was like because he had to play backup center. Um, I mean, I think that's like a little bit of an underrated storyline is that Aaron Gordon played okay, but the Wolves aren't really a good matchup for him either. Like people say, oh, that's it's like they build this team to beat Denver and to like go after Jokic, but it's like the size also affects Gordon, right? He's got Rudy Gobert on him, which is, you know, Rudy Gobert is a funny topic because people like to roast him like when he gets cooked by Luca. It's like who doesn't get cooked by Luca? But Aaron Gordon's in the dunker spot. That's like perfect for Rudy to defend, right? So he had a pretty good series considering I think that's like the hardest team for him to play well against, in my opinion. So I think Gordon more or less does what he needs to do and is who he is. And I don't think he has a whole lot of variance in like I just don't think he has another level to go to. I don't know if that's pessimistic or unfair, but yeah, when he doesn't show up, obviously it hurts us. But I don't ever be like Aaron Gordon needs to be the best player on the floor tonight for us to win. I mean, every once in a while it happens. He had it was a game. It was either game 3 or game 4 where he had like 28 points. I think he was really good, but he'll
Yeah.
do that like once a series. You can't count on him to give you like 20 every night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I think
with
that's
with
pretty fair.
Gordon, go ahead, Ray.
Sure, I think I think he's really flexible. The fact that he was able to relieve Jamal in some ball handling duties, it's pretty big for any power forward, honestly. And yeah, I think no huge drop off. Maybe he doesn't have as much energy to expend, especially come the end of the year. But I think with a little bit of a better alignment of like just burden in terms of like minutes and energy and that sort of thing in another year, I think he could be perfectly capable of doing what we need him to do. I don't know if CTU, or if you had anything to add to that, or if Michael Porter is another guy I kind of think about in this range in my list, so to speak. Is like I thought he was good. He could have been better in the
Mhm.
playoffs, but overall, had a good year.
Yeah, I think just to kind of talk about the Aaron Gordon point a little bit. I think Gordon was good in the playoffs for the most part. I think the Wolves are aligned to take advantage of his deficiencies that we kind of saw. He was great on the road in those games, so he was really good. But I think some of the factors that we saw with these teams kind of going double big now, and the Wolves are unique where their bigs are actually versatile, where they could shoot, pass and dribble. Like other teams aren't really having that. Um, And with Gordon, like Peter said, like Rudy was just kind of able to camp in the paint, and it made it difficult for the Nuggets to go 5 out. And I think that's one of the problems with Gordon is that he doesn't allow the Nuggets to go a full 5 out, even though he can play in the dunker spot, which is gravity in its of itself and quote unquote spacing. But I do think, like I said with Vlatko this year, like him being out limited the Nuggets from going 5 out. Like the Nuggets could have played Vlatko in place of AG at times, or in place of say um, Mike at some point if they wanted to, right? Like the Nuggets just didn't have they had too much overlap, right? Where it was just like Gordon just had to play basically. Mike and KCP had to play. There was nobody else real other than Christian. There was nobody else that Malone could have penciled in and said, "Hey, let me put this guy in the game to try to like make up for it." But I think that's like next year, like we kind of said with the bet point, where it's like they need two veterans because they need more lineup flexibility. And we kind of saw too with like what Ray said with Gordon, Gordon's playmaking ability kind of tailed off by the end of the series because no one was respecting his jump shot. So it's like he was initiating stuff from like the top of the key, but teams were just kind of backing off of him. And I think that's where like the problem with Bruce was where he left is that Bruce was like a downhill threat. He gets to the rim like Gordon could too, but when he's being guarded by like Rudy at the paint in the paint, or say like a cat, right? It's just like a different kind of problem to face. Um, so yeah, who wants you want to talk about Mike next or?
Um, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I do see what you're saying, especially like kind of like Grace mentioned. There is a situation that happened a lot where Jokic gets the ball in a short roll and he's got, 8, 10 foot for the basket. And AG is there on the cut coming out of that short corner. But it's a really tough pass because they're both 7 feet tall. And then B, it needs a certain amount of lob and touch that it's kind of recoverable for a guy with Rudy Gobert's dimensions. And that when that matchup is kind of kind of locked in the way that Finch did, spacing the ball became really difficult, which I think is a big reason why to transition into Michael Porter, why we need him. I think there are a lot of, like we were mentioning earlier, a lot of fans want to trade Michael Porter, but you can't really put out 7 footer, 6'8", 6'10" front courts without having a guy like
Right.
Michael Porter, who is both the shooter that he is, who does get that respect, who creates the space that Aaron Gordon would never have that space if not for Michael Porter,
Right.
and still be
That's why
able
they
to
work so well
contribute on the
together.
boards and defensively, and yeah, even swap roles just a smidge on occasion. So I almost grade them as a tandem that like they were pretty good together.
Hmm.
I couldn't expect that much more out of them given their circumstances. Mike played 79 games. That's big too. I mean, talking about like I know he had the back surgeries ready and everything, but he's trending up in terms of like his health and physicality. So,
Yeah, I mean, I
yay,
think with
Mike.
Mike too, like yeah, for sure. No, definitely. He was like big for the regular season. Like Murray missed what 23 games. He played 50 in
Yeah,
59 games. I mean, and MPJ basically took the mantle as the second guy when Murray was out. And again, it was a mixed bag for the most part, but he was reliable and he guided Denver to a top two seed, which basically they tied for first. But if you want to factor in the tiebreaker, and the most wins in franchise history. So, like I said, I just think a lot of this has been like kind of overblown with like the Nuggets, like what happened to them. Um, and I do think like to kind of go off of Ray's point, isn't it surprising that the Nuggets lost in the playoffs because of their offense? What is that? That's basically what happened. Like their defense was good. They gave like 90 something points in the last game. Their offense just was stuck in the mud, and I think a lot
honestly,
of that's
no. I'm letting
your
you
back.
finish though.
Oh no,
I have
no, you
thoughts,
you
but
were you were lagging a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I think like their
Oh,
offense was like a big detriment. You know what I mean? And it's like I never thought in the Jokic era that would be a problem, but again, Murray was hampered. We saw, and again, I'm sure we'll get to Murray, but overall his playoffs weren't good. Um, but yeah, like Mike obviously didn't have a good game seven, and I'm a big Mike advocate, as everybody knows. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say like he's blameless for what happened. Game seven wasn't good. Game 6 and 5 weren't good either. But again, the Lakers series, he averaged 23 and 8 on ultra efficiency. Um, I got to give him credit for that. He's second best player in the playoffs. So Again, Mike's always going to be polarizing because he's on a max contract, and people are just always going to think that he's not deserving of it. And again, it does limit the Nuggets' flexibility, but putting Jokic with a shooter like that is something that's rare and something I'm just willing to just bite the bullet for.
Yeah. Yeah, if I want to be honest, I kind of agree with Grace. Don't wa- I try to be optimistic.
I think we lost him.
Uh-oh. Got that Arvada internet now.
Yeah.
There he is.
Arvada internet, let's go. Yeah, I got that nuclear fallout internet.
Man.
Let's get it.
Man,
But what I
We
was gonna say
Ray,
is
just like a month after I figure out my internet issues, now you're gonna have internet issues? Man, we're just gonna stay at the bottom
we
of
will
Nuggets
see.
podcast, aren't we?
Yo,
nah, you
chill.
guys are killing it.
We're trending up, okay? Trending up.
CT, you might have to
But
jump ship, bro. We're sabotaging your career.
No, definitely not.
yes,
Definitely not.
don't let us hold you down. But no, I think oh my okay, almost failed me again. Okay. Well, I'll work on that. In the meantime, I think I've found a slowly downward trend in terms of the Nuggets' offensive flexibility, just how the different ways they can play and want to play.
Right.
I just feel like it's gotten more and more like deliberate and
Hmm.
stiff and inflexible, honestly. Like the Murray Jokic two man game is so potent and effective. Like obviously, whether it's a DHO or a pick and roll, like those two can be great. We're going to talk about Jamal, but they can be great. And having Aaron Gordon on the short corner, I think it's right there with Kenneth Faried for me as far as effectiveness out of that spot. Mike and KCP, they're great shooters, but it is a lot of just reps and film for other teams that they have to like zone in on. Okay, how do we attack this sort of how do we attack this offense? I mean, I think we've kind of seen the Lakers say to Jokic, okay, we're going to bring you two bigs. So now that dump off pass is tough, but also you shooting over us is also tough. And I think Minnesota's added like, okay, well now we're going to add more on ball length and pressure to Jamal's experience, so that so much so that we can just put a guy on Mike and ask him not to leave him, and now you don't have
Right.
like the outlets for Jokic, and they didn't really have like, okay, well we can go to this other thing, this other way of playing. Um, but that's okay.
They like they like
If
problem
you're watching
solvers.
this, it's not
That's the
too late.
problem.
um, Well, I think some of the players on the roster already can do a better job of what I think is their solution, is just moving to like I think reintroducing some of that off ball movement, reintroducing some of that motion, that off ball screening, the cutting, playing with a little bit more pace, whether it's in the full court or the half court, and just not locking in necessarily offensively to one action as much, and I think they'd be fine. I think Julian is a guy we've talked about already who has a skill set that I think really suits that style of play. Um, as much as Mike can't dribble the ball, I think it would help him a lot to get to work in a system that involves more cutting, that involves more off ball movement, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Aaron Gordon is such a high flyer. I think Christian Brown can shoot. I think he's a smart guy. All these players can figure it out. Even Jamal, even Mike. And Jokic is flexible enough that he wants to play that way. Um, Whatever way is working, I should say. So I could see that being the solution for them, and hopefully they have the guys to do it. Um, I guess the last person I really want to talk about it is Jamal.
Wait,
I think for that, yeah.
Yeah, you got to let me jump in on that. I think the offense was definitely
Okay.
took a step back. I got a football analogy for you. So I
My
think we all
favorite.
know who Tyreek Hill is, right? You know, he's one of the best wide receivers, one of the fastest players we've ever seen in the NFL. Now, most
Yes.
teams had a guy who is obviously not as dynamic as Hill, but is really fast. And his job is basically just to like run a go route and kind of take the top off the defense, open things up, right? That's kind of who Bruce Brown was for the Nuggets last year. I know you might not view him as like a burner, but because he had the ball handling and the slashing ability to get to the basket, he had a lot of plays where the offense was kind of bogged down, and because he was like a secondary playmaker and the defense wasn't keying on him, he could kind of, get to the basket. He made a lot of critical plays for the Nuggets last year. And I
He did.
think without him, that is kind of what bogged a lot of stuff down, Ray, is that as good as our players are, it's so specified to the role that it's like if you're not doing the Jokic Murray two-man game, KCP is basically either shooting a three or shooting his midi. Mike, same thing. Like you said, can't dribble. He did get a little bit better at the closing out. He kind of started to add that like little runner this year, which I thought was an interesting, like that push shot. Didn't really go in very much, but at least he's trying stuff. And yeah, CB, I mean, he's got a long way to go, but the Nuggets have to add ball handling this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's kind of been an interesting discussion. Like, if you could only pick one, do you want a backup center or do you want a better, person in the Reggie Jackson role? And my thing has always been I have to choose the center simply because you cannot win the championship with Jokic at less than 100%. You need to take the pounding off him. So that's why I choose that. But the other one is like you can make a great case that the ball handling is more important. Hopefully they get both, but I just hope they address at least one of those with a vet CT. I mean, if
Yeah.
Booth just runs it back and says, Vlatko being back and the other guys being older is going to be good
Mistake.
enough, I just don't think that's going to be good enough.
No, I don't think so either. Um, yeah, I think with the backup big situation is more of a regular season thing because Jokic was just gassed by the end of it.
Right.
Like there was no playable big. You look at Zeke and you look at DeAndre, who's well
He's got to
past his
retire.
prime. Yeah, I mean it's basically over for him now. I don't think the Nuggets should bring him back, honestly. As great of a person I think he is, but the Nuggets need the roster spots now, and I think with the playmaking point that Peter brought up is important because we saw in the Wolves series. I mean, Murray he was getting completely obliterated by all the wings that they had, and there was nobody else to bail him out. And if you play Reggie with Jamal, it's just you're at such a vulnerable spot defensively. And that was the biggest problem that I had with Booth bringing back Reggie was because now the Nuggets bench, they don't have first off, they have no playmaker. And if you want to put Murray in the backcourt with somebody, there's no defensive backcourt now. You know what I mean? And if you see like the backcourt the Nuggets have, it's like KCP, CB. Your Strawder obviously think could be that guy as more of an offensive weapon, but I mean CB and KCP, there's a lot of overlap there as far as defensive guys and can't really dribble much. And I think in the regular season next year, like the Nuggets, my main guy that I want the Nuggets to get is Chris Dunn. Um,
I'd
and I
love
think
him.
with Dunn, he's a walking paint touch, and the Nuggets just didn't have guys who were able to generate paint touches. If you look at Murray was able to, when he was healthy, and Jokic, of course, creates offense. And Gordon's a bully, right? But I mean, he has limitations because he can't really shoot much. But it's like if you have a guard like that besides Murray who could do that and like free Murray up off the ball and he can run off the staggers. And the biggest thing with Edwards that he was able to just like stay on Murray in that series is that the Nuggets they couldn't have Murray run off the screens and tire Edwards out. And Edwards is a guy he struggles off the ball defensively. You put him on the ball and it's now okay. This is the solve now, and the Nuggets
Right.
are cooked. You know what I mean? If
There's
the
less
Nuggets had another
thinking.
guard, right? Exactly. If the Nuggets had another guard like a Dunn or even like a Dellen Wright, they don't have to be that great. It's just at least you have a guy in the backcourt defensively who could, bother an Ant or say somebody else while being a playmaker, right? It's just the Nuggets didn't have that guy, and it's just pivotal that Booth gets a guy like that. And if he doesn't, I'll be pretty disappointed in his kind of thinking moving forward because the Nuggets just need they need veterans. Like they need the vets because the young guys can't carry the ship off the bench. It's just a kind of like an unrealistic ask, even though
Yeah.
these guys are older veterans, or I'm sorry, older like older younger players from college, right? With the exception of Watson, of course. But it's like you need it like a Bruce and a Jeff. Like they were instrumental in winning the championship for the Nuggets. If they bring back a Blacko and he could be a rotation guy, and you bring like a Drummond or a Goga or like a Tice, and then you combine that with a Dunn or a Wright. Like I just think the Nuggets are just much more flexible offensively. They're much better defensively too, and I think too it'll also like ease the burden on the starters, which is a big kind of you know a big point moving forward.
Yep.
I hope so. I mean, I hope so in the sense that like I hope it works out for them. Um, it's a tough, you're talking about that like push and pull of center versus point guard. I could be open to either side of it. When I'm looking at the Nuggets bench from last year, I mean, part of it is that they don't have that penetrating factor, like who's going to get into the paint and create for other people. But also, I think about how ineffective Zeke is as a floor spacer, both in the sense that he isn't the vertical threat that even like a Mason Plumlee is,
Hmm.
but also the fact that he stopped shooting the ball and or okay, I'm back. So not having those two things, I think both it hurts them on both sides. Like either one of these sort of paths would make them better, more functional units. But the fact that they didn't have that and that I don't know if you guys are cool with transitioning to Murray before we talk about like maybe a few draft picks and offseason moves, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for Jamal, we kind of expect that from him to some extent, and he didn't really have it this year. And I think that is another like factor for talking about. It's not that Jokic and he play the same position, but that Murray's the second best player. Murray is kind of the guy who he gets 25, 30 shots a game, and we're kind of asking him to be that burden relief that you see with so many other stars in the league, or what you're looking for from the situations, whether it's, sometimes Jaylen Brown looks like the best player on the floor for Boston. Sometimes Kyrie Irving looks like the best player on the floor in Dallas, and you kind of expect the same sort of parity from Jamal Murray, and we kind of can excuse it when it's not. We have this expectation that come playoff time you're going to be there and show up and do all the things we need you to do and be that much better because your regular seasons aren't good enough, but that's okay. Sorry to keep dropping in on you like this. Maybe if we can take a break after this, I will try to fix something about that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not even. This is probably my biggest. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Point about the Denver Nuggets, and that's probably Jamal's year.
Yeah,
If either of you have
I'd
thoughts
agree.
about that,
I'd agree. I think with Murray
I
is,
mean,
I mean, if we're gonna, if go ahead, Pete.
Oh no, keep going. I'll go after you.
I was okay. I was just gonna say basically with Murray is that we had this expectation for the year coming in right after the finals run that he was gonna be an all-star, right? And get potentially get all NBA, and people were like, oh, he's gonna get the supermax, and Mike's gonna be out the door now because of that, and there's flexibility concerns with the roster, and he just like came up well short of that. And I hate to be, I'm hard on Murray, just because I believe in him a lot, and I'm also hard on him because his role on the team as a second guy. You know what I mean? And it's like he has a lot of responsibility. Um, and unfortunately, from the regular season perspective, like he wasn't available, and it's out of his control a lot of it. But he didn't play in like 23 games. Then you fast forward to the playoffs, and he was injured. So again, I can't really like put full blame on him for that. But and then if you look at like the splits, I mean his efficiency was not good at all. Like really, really bad. He shot like 40% from the field, 30 something percent from like 32% from three. just was not a good overall playoffs for him. And it's crazy because the Nuggets almost still won in a game 7 despite all of the terrible stuff that happened with the Nuggets. Like that's for me is like the most optimistic point that I could kind of take away from it. But yeah, with Murray, I mean, I think if we're gonna like divvy up blame, and it's obviously not really it's a team game, so I could say it for everybody. But if I'm going to like apply blame for like the series or like the playoffs for like all of it or the most, I'd give it to Murray. And I think too, like he was like he shot the most I think out of everybody in the Nuggets like throughout the playoff run, and by like a considerable margin too. And it's like that has to be Jokic, and like you can give Mike a little more leeway to shoot, and maybe KCP as well. And it's just I think overall in the playoffs, like, and again, I think a lot of it was the roster construct as well that like kind of buried Murray too. Like there was no other guard out there that he could play beside. So I give him a little bit of credit there. But yeah, I mean overall, like if we're gonna like divvy up the slice of the pie for blame, I mean I give it to Murray the most. And that's just because of his responsibilities. And I just think too, like defensively, he wasn't good. He got targeted a lot in this playoffs compared to like what I've seen in the past. And too offensively, I just thought he just never really found a rhythm. So um, disappointing, but hopefully next year he can bounce back. And we have that finals run and the bubble run, you know, for what he's able to accomplish. So I'm not going to just sit here and be like, oh, you know, I want him gone now, or like this is like an indictment on him. He had a bad run, and I think that happens. But next year, like going forward, like he's gonna have to be. I don't know about playoff Murray, but he's gonna have to be better than what he was this year if the Nuggets want to have a chance, to win a finals.
Peter, I'm gonna let you cook.
All right. So I've had over a week to think about this because I know you're going to be coming in hot, Ray. I had to take a step back and think about the whole picture here, right? Not just Jamal Murray's year, but his whole career, okay? He had a down year based on what we expected. He still had a good year, led the team to 57 wins. I mean, obviously Jokic's the best player, but he's still a big part of the team. And I think as much as we made about the physical injuries, nagging, missing time, not being in shape, whatever you want to call it, all fair. I think that this year might have mentally challenged Jamal Murray more than any other year. And you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? He tore his ACL. Yeah, but he didn't play, right? So it's like it's a different mental hurdle. And so, I've torn my ACL before, both knees actually, but obviously I never had to come back and play basketball at NBA level. And so the way I look at Jamal's journey is breaks out in the bubble. Okay, Nuggets have a great year. Next year gets off to a whatever start. They make the Gordon trade, they take off, right? Nuggets fans are on top of the world. S word is uttered and it all falls apart for 2 playoff runs. Now, when you're rehabbing and you're having dark days and you're thinking about like, am I ever going to be as good as I used to be? When you do that, when you make it all the way back like he did, and then play well in the playoffs last year, that has to feel good. And there's a sense of accomplishment. But I think there's also an element of human nature once you do accomplish that to say, I did it, right? It's like you don't really realize how hard it is to get back to the finals until you're like in your 30s and you've maybe only been there once or twice. So I think Jamal was still kind of like early enough in his career when he's like, this is just who we are now. Like it's our turn to be the dynasty or something. And the players made some interesting comments, I thought, after game 7. Aaron Gordon talked a lot about how hard it was to be the hunted. I don't doubt that. But a part of me is also like, well, don't you have to be ready for that? Like, you guys won the championship. Like, how this works. You've been in the league. You get up to play the Golden State Warriors when they were champions. Teams are going to get up to play you. So I think that wore a lot on them. But at least now I think they'll have the motivation again to be like, we got knocked off, and we still think we're the best team. So it was disappointing, but I really do think that, like, as much as we talk about how mentally tough Jamal Murray is, I think this season kind of got the best of him. I don't know if that's too harsh, but I just think even the best athletes have like dips in mental toughness and in how they're going through stuff. And I don't think he would ever admit this. That's not really like his style. I'm not saying I'm like can get inside his head. I'm simply speaking more from a guy who's like gone through that injury, came back to like be able to, play basketball, at my level, obviously. But after that, there is a period of relaxation. It's like I did it. Okay, cool. Now I'm back to normal. And I think that's just like human nature. I don't think he was able to like find that level again from last year because he'd proven it. So now it's like he should have more motivation again because, he didn't play as good as he wanted. So it was a sad year, but I still think that it's a good break for him now and he can bounce back.
That's fair. I think those are all valid points. He can bounce back. He still has a lot of opportunity in front of him. Um, I'm a little worried about I don't know what his international role is going to be for Canada,
Yeah.
but I think that's going to be a tough challenge for him just in the context of like you're traveling. It's harder to do all the things that I wish he would do at the things I'm about to talk about when he is traveling and playing games and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, here's the thing. You're the point guard. You're the point guard, and you can't bring the ball up. You can't. That's like job number one. If you're an NBA point guard, you should be able. It's a press. Sometimes you get pressed. It's part of your job to not fold. And that is really unfortunate because yeah, he hopefully has more motivation than ever this offseason. But I would think, I would have thought, and I was optimistic last season about this, that would be the summer that where you would say, okay, for the first time you have a whole offseason to recover and build work on yourself and not be worried about the injury and all these sorts of things. You've got super max money on the table. So it's tough for me to say like, okay, well, this is the year where Jamal Murray is going to get serious. And he's already 27. Like, and I'm not saying that that's everything in life at 27, but he's not 23. I don't expect like immaturity.
Yeah.
So both on the court and also some of the off court things with how he talks to people, in the media, you see it in like Nuggets social posts and things, interviewing players. He's just kind of like not. He acts like he doesn't want us to like him, and like I, I don't want to say you have to, but it just doesn't bode well when you're that guy off the court, but you're also Mr. I'm gonna throw stuff on the court when we lose. That's not cool. We don't like that. And I don't want to pile on the guy, but like it's unacceptable. Um, so I've transitioned from I'm really hoping you figure it out this year to you got to figure it out this year because this is kind of the year he's in a contract year. I think that's
Yeah.
maybe we can take a quick break and I don't know, talk about that a little bit before we go. But he's in a contract year and he's got to figure this out if you want the Nuggets to do well because everything sort of runs through him. He's the point guard. He's the quarterback of the team, so to speak. So, Jamal, don't be the weak link. It's not okay. We don't want that. Nobody wants that.
Not the weak
So,
link.
yeah. What do you want me to say? That he wasn't? He was. Like
He scored
the way
35
the
points
way
in
they
game
run
7.
offense is that okay. He also got his pocket picked multiple times down the stretch, but
He did. The team
everything
lost.
like Aaron Gordon's success, you're there's blame to go around, but like as far as who I hold the most on right now, I mean, he gets the money, he gets the sort of position, and there comes responsibility with that. You can't the way the offense runs, it's dependent upon him playing well. You know, if he's not playing well, Jokic can't get the ball because you can't get the ball up the court. It means you
Right.
can't run the pick and roll action. It means when Jokic gets the ball, they're not paying attention to Jamal, so they're pressuring him that much more. And Aaron Gordon's getting that much more attention, and Michael Porter's getting that much more attention. So he's the most, in my opinion, like the linchpin of the team, really. Not to mention the defensive aspects, which you could make a whole film of Jamal Murray lowlights defensively.
Yeah, it
And I
wasn't
wanted
great this
him,
year.
we all want him, we all believe in him, and that we all think he can step up in these big moments. And we want to believe he's that guy that okay, maybe he has a D in the class going into finals week, but for some reason he can just cram and ace and come out with a C plus or something. But he didn't do that. And when you kind of play that game of like, I think for Michael Porter, it's a little bit different because like if Michael Porter's playing 79 games and has a great first round in the playoffs and is a disappointing second round, it's like at least I'm weighing that against your whole year. But for Jamal, I mean, you had a bad year, period. So,
Yeah,
sorry,
I agree.
I don't want,
I
I
I
don't,
agree with
I
Ray.
don't want to, I don't be that guy. I'm sorry. You just got to be better. Um,
I agree with Ray. I think for the most part,
so,
it's tough discussion with
can
the contract coming
can
up.
I,
I mean, that's tough. You know.
yeah, I want to take a quick break to discuss our sponsors. We don't have them, but I'll tell you what, we've each written
Not yet.
articles that I'm going to have
Can I shout
in the
out a
description
sponsor?
that you should definitely go read. Yes, not yet. Sure,
I just got this Jamal
sure.
Murray jersey
I believe
from
in you.
DHgate. It is a website in China that makes
Okay.
jerseys for like way cheaper. Highly recommend.
We're the DH gate of Nuggets podcasts. That's hilarious.
We so are. I don't know if we're even
I
that
love
good.
that though. How much was it?
It's like $25.
That's
But you
crazy.
can't
I'm not
tell.
gonna
It's
lie.
like the real one. It's got the Nike symbols on it and everything.
There's also a lot of just like not real merchandise out there. I've noticed. So, I don't. It's really about the vibes than it is. I don't think I've ever seen a fan come check another fan's authenticity as far as what they're
That's
wearing.
not real,
So,
bro.
yeah, there's not a real Nuggets jersey. So, yeah, if you want to help us grow the show, tell a friend, like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Um, and maybe follow us on the Twitters, read an article, or just tell us we're doing a good job. So yeah, contract season. Contract season is here for Jamal Murray, and they have. I mean, first of all, if you have
Uh-oh.
Maybe we lost him.
Oh my God. Ray's internet's about as consistent as the Nuggets' second unit.
Man,
Well, yeah.
I guess we
Jamal
gotta call
Murray.
back.
Jamal's going into his last year of contract. He can sign an extension this summer. I think they have up until was it like October 30th to negotiate or something, and then I don't really understand
Yeah,
all the
probably
extension
around
rules, but I think it would be a mistake for him not to sign if they offer him a max this summer. But
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. Think so too. And again, it's tough with the Nuggets options as well. Because I mean, if you really want to think about it, it's like if you lose him, I mean, it's it's not looking good. The Nuggets need a point guard, and
Right.
do I think he'd leave the team? I mean, I don't know. I don't. This is like a first for everybody involved. If he doesn't sign that contract, he's a free agent. But I can't really see him anywhere else, just because I feel like Jokic is someone who accentuates his strengths a lot and does cover a lot for his deficiencies. So I'd see like somewhere else. Like I don't know how else it would go. I think Jamal will still be a good player, but I do think Jokic does help him a lot when it comes to looking the part and playing
Yeah.
at a high level, which he does for a lot of players. It's not just Jamal, but I do think Jokic especially does facilitate in that aspect.
Well, and I think
There he is.
as much as I love Jamal, CT, one undeniable point that people have brought up repeatedly is yes, Jamal and Jokic play great together, but there's nobody in the world that could do what Jokic does. Like you could put other guys in the NBA in Jamal's role, and they would do just as good as Jamal, if not better. So Jamal is obviously much more replaceable, but he still doesn't grow on trees, right? Like he's still like a top 25, 30-ish NBA player. And we're lucky to have him. So he has said he wants to play the rest of his career in Denver, which is great to hear. Obviously, Kyrie said the same thing about Boston, but we think Jamal's a little more level-headed than Kyrie. But one thing we haven't talked about yet regarding Jamal, don't worry, I'm not changing topics. Booth had like a very interesting semi call out in his presser, right? He was basically like, I thought it was actually like beautiful the way he worded it. I retweeted. I was like, this is one of the most brilliant, like motivational things I've ever seen, because he didn't just say like, Jamal, you're out of shape or you need to like be better. He was like, we won the championship last year. He should go look at NBA history and see what guys in his position, like what other championship guards did after their championship year to like, get right or like, keep playing at that level. I thought it was it was like a subtle message like, hey, bro, we need you. Like, you're our guy, but we need you to be at 100% and like fully functional. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he responds. I'm confident. I think he will respond. But Ray, everything you said is fair. The time is now.
Yeah. There's not. I don't have a lot to say about it, but I mean, yeah, he just needs to do better, and hopefully he does, because the Nuggets need him to do well. I think they're in a position to kind of transition maybe a little bit into some like moves, what we should be doing, thinking about going into the future. Conversation is that the NBA with the new CBA is very different in how teams are going to be sustainable and what their constructions can look like. And CT, I kind of curious what you think of this. I feel like the Nuggets can't really win without Michael Porter or Jamal Murray. That they're both necessary, but it also means they're in a tough spot because of the contracts that they both demand. Them both being max players, I don't think it's a problem right now. Like I'm very comfortable with paying them each like $30-ish million. But I would be curious as to what your thoughts are, thinking about like the long term for those two. And maybe I have a hot take at the end. We'll see what you guys think of it. But what is it going to look like if the Nuggets do want to keep their core, thinking about their core as the trio together?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike's got another 3 years on his contract, so he's still got a little bit more time, because Murray's gonna be a free agent next summer.
I think I just got
Yeah,
that
no, I
off.
agree. I mean, I agree. I think with Mike, I just think he's necessary for the team. The Murray Jokic two-man game doesn't operate at its highest level without Mike. I just think his spacing is too important. And people discount Mike's defensive ability as well. As a guy as a backside help defender, really good rim protector at times as well. His individual defense, I think, was more of a mixed bag this year than the last, but still pretty good at certain points in time. And yeah, I just think Mike's like a pretty important fixture to what they do. And I think, like I said, it's the contract that really drives people a lot of like away from him. And again, if once you get past the 3 years, I mean, I don't. Maybe Mike doesn't take the max if he stays with the Nuggets. Depending if he's still here for the duration of his deal. Maybe after that, he's not a max guy, which I would assume he's not. I wouldn't think another team offers him a max. But again, if the Nuggets could maybe get him on a discounted deal, still probably pretty substantial. But yeah, no, I agree. I just think that with Jokic, I think like Peter said before, Jokic is easy to build around. At the same time, he's also difficult to build around because you need certain skill sets around him. Like you're not going to put a bunch of creators around Jokic. Doesn't really make sense, right? You're not going to put a bunch of small guards like Tim Connolly did around Jokic and see if that works, right? There are certain aspects to what you have to be in order to play next to Jokic, and their front court has that with Gordon and Mike, two athletic forwards, uh, both versatile in their own way. Then you have a guy like KCP who's a good guard defender, right? And that's what the Nuggets need going forward because with Jokic, we saw in the years with Murray and MPJ out, they just had so many weaknesses where it was just like they had no shot creators, but they also had no one who could run a pick and roll and put pressure on a defense. And then you look at their defenders that they had at that point, and it was laughable on the perimeter, right? Jokic was there was highlights of Jokic, not defending well, and that was because of the guard defenders weren't good. You have a Facu or a Bones and a Monte. No offense to him, but I mean, it's just like, especially now, like I just think the roster is perfectly built at this point, and moving forward, I personally wouldn't want to break it up. If we're kind of going to like the what they should do portion of the pod, it's just like I think they should run it back. And again, I just think the bench. I put in my article. I just think if they make bench tweaks to like what we said before, getting a good backup point guard that doesn't even have to be a backup point guard, really, just somebody who could generate paint touches, facilitate a bit with Murray on the floor, and be a decent defender, and get a backup big that could just take some time off of Jokic. I think the Nuggets are back in business. I really do think that, and we'll see what they do with the draft pick as well. And I just don't brings back Zeke. It's a whole different conversation, but I just don't think Zeke could come back just because due to the contract and the inflexibility and due to him not being able to play. I know there are some Zeke believers out there, but unfortunately after this year, I'm out.
Yeah, I will say I'm out on Zeke as a center. I think like
I just don't think he can play power forward either.
like
He can't shoot.
proto. Well, he could maybe.
He did.
Passive
I don't know about
rebounding.
anymore.
I think that's nice. Yeah,
They should
I
have
think
traded
that's
for the
so.
Knicks after that
It's
game
almost
where he
like
dropped like 20 in the
you have
garden.
to if I'm talking to Zeke right now. Maybe that would somehow work out for them. I don't know. But no, if I'm talking to Zeke right now, you gotta figure your shot out. Figure your shot out and go back to being. You doesn't have to be fast. I don't care about that. Just shoot well, and maybe you could play power forward. Maybe. I like you. He works hard. He's here. You could up your value, so we could trade you somewhere. That would be nice. Like I kind of see him as like a maybe prime mid-season trade candidate. I don't know. But yeah, I'd be very curious, Peter. I'm sure you've given this some thought as well, as far as like what you'd like to see in the future. Give me your brightest timeline for the offseason. If you have
Like,
one, or aspects of it.
are you
if you've
talking
thought of them.
pipe dream or are you talking realistic?
Like a best case scenario of what is realistic. If that
Right,
makes
like
sense.
best case scenario is like
What you
we
think of as
re-sign
realistic.
KCP and like it doesn't trigger the second apron. I don't know if that's even
I said,
possible. I don't think it really is.
What is realistic? But but we'll see.
Because to me, like CT, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the first domino, right? Like they say they want to bring him back. If they do bring him back, it's pretty much only vet minimums after that. Unless there's trades. But if they don't bring KCP back, they could still use the mid-level for somebody. So
Chris
I'm
Dunn would
leaning.
be my guy at time at the mid level.
Yeah. Chris Dunn would be
I'd
dope.
probably give him or maybe a portion of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. I unfortunately I'm pessimistic. I don't think KCP's coming back. But I have a name for you guys that I think is probably a pipe dream, but crazier things have happened because, CT, you mentioned earlier that you don't really know what teams are doing, like not signing Bruce Brown. I think that's sort of like a hidden ability of Calvin Booth that we're underestimating. Is like, do you remember when it was like the first minute of free agency a couple years ago and we signed DeAndre Jordan? We're like, what? I think what the front office does is they identify guys they really want, and if they can get them right away, great. But if not, they decide to be patient instead of scramble, because what you don't want to do is overpay for the wrong guy. So as we see the market, matriculate and like free agency plays out and everything, sometimes guys get squeezed. And I saw a report earlier that a guy the Nuggets would have interest, which is absolutely wild to me, that if he's available at our price range, is Tobias Harris. He's coming off a max
No.
contract, but hey, if nobody wants
No,
him,
don't make me leave.
that
I
would
don't know.
Don't make
I
me
that
can't
would
leave.
do
be
it.
incredible.
I can't do it.
You can't. I mean, he would be an amazing bench scorer
I have
for
no
us.
interest. I've
You could have a lineup where you
for the
have
minimum.
Gordon at center, Mike at power forward, and Tobias at the 3, and you still got plenty of rebounding. He's probably a slightly better defender than Mike, so you could even slot him in there sometimes. But we probably won't get him. The more realistic name that I saw is Gordon Hayward. I just don't know if he has anything left. I mean,
I think he's washed.
that was such a weird ending in
I
Charlotte.
can't
I mean,
believe
in
you showed
in
up to this
OKC.
podcast. Tobias
Huh?
Harris?
You don't like Tobias?
Tobias Harris. I can't. No,
But
this is
Ray,
not
we
happening.
wouldn't have Tobias Harris on a match.
Is it for
We'd
the
have him on
minimum?
Yeah. It's basically
I
like younger
still
Melo
don't.
with less
I
ego.
don't. No, I just don't see it. I don't see the value, the fit, the talent. I don't see
All right.
anything. I don't like anything about that. But I respect your
Interesting.
bravery in bringing that to the table.
I didn't know you were such
I
a
will
Tobias
give
hater.
mine.
Do you hate J. Cole too?
I'm
They
just
look
not
the
a
same.
Tobias. See, here's the thing. We could have that conversation. I don't hate Tobias Harris. It's the opposite of hate. It's not love, it's indifference. I'm indifferent about him because he's indifferent about
Oh,
himself. He's indifferent about basketball. I feel
damn.
like he's just kind of there, and I don't love that. You just be nah. Anyway, can I get I so CT? I would love to hear some draft picks. Do you have any other favorites? Maybe either at center or point guard. But I like Deron Holmes if they could get him. If
Yeah.
they can also bring in Andre Drummond. If
Right.
they could have those
I agree.
two together, I feel like that would be a great one could play one day, one could play the other day, depending on just the circumstance or the timing. And occasionally you
Right.
could give Yoke a night off, and you've got bigs. Duran maybe could play with some other players who aren't maybe Jokic, maybe not Jokic, but he seems like someone who's good at basketball, which I think is more important than anything. So,
Yep.
um,
Yeah. No,
and
for sure.
I'd be okay with a minimum pickup at point guard. I don't know who, but I think their chances are a lot higher if they have a competent big to work with. Is what I'll
Mhm.
say.
No,
But
I
yeah,
agree.
CT, if you
I
want to pick up
think
from there, that's
yeah.
my pipe dream.
No, for sure. I think too with the backup big situation. I think if they pick a Holmes at 28, which actually there was rumored the other day that he got a promise in the late first round. Um, I don't usually don't do a lot of sourcing stuff. Like I usually never do, but I don't know. I've been kind of like asking around because I want to know what they're gonna do with that. I
I
did
just
last
asked
year.
Miroslav.
Yeah, I did last year. Somebody actually like I don't do like the sourcing stuff really. Like I'm not really about that. Somebody messaged me like last year was like Pickett's gonna be the pick for the Nuggets, and I was like in disbelief. And then like they actually picked him, and this was like early on in the process. Like I'm talking like May, like after the finals talk. Like somebody
Hmm.
messaged me about that. Um, And then, yeah, so I think with Holmes, like, I think he'd be good. Like Ray said, like, if they could get a backup big and then maybe alternate some days, play Holmes one night, play Drummond or say a Tice or a Goga one night. You know what I mean? I think that'd be great. Like, I just think those two positions are where the Nuggets need vets. Backup point guard, backup center. Those two right there. I think the Nuggets have the wings down. They have Watson, they have Brown, they have Strawther, they have Blacko for next year. I think that's it. That's all you need. So I think that's really what it comes
I
down to.
think
And then for the point guards, I like Tristan Newton from UConn. I don't know if you guys watched the national championship last year, but it was UConn against Purdue with Zach Edey, and Newton was the MVP back-to-back years, MVP of the tournament. He actually worked out for the Nuggets on Friday, so maybe there's some interest there. But I just really like what Newton brings to the table as a bigger point guard.
You said Edey worked out with the Nuggets?
No, Newton. Tristan Newton worked out with the Nuggets on Friday. No Edey. But yeah, I think Newton, especially for me personally, I think he's better than Pickett. So like, I would get my offseason like wish list is to get rid of Zeke. This might sound a little harsh. Zeke, Reggie, Pickett, and Tyson. I just think those guys are just the two other guys. Like, it's just they're taking up roster spots. So I would just kind of like get those guys off the team, bring in Newton and Holmes, sign Dunn and one of Dunn or Wright, and then Tice, Goga or Drummond. I think that's a dream offseason right there for the Nuggets if they could get that.
yeah, I would be pretty cool with that. I mean, to your point, I would say part of the reason I'm down on Tobias Harris, Peter, is the depth that they have at that sort of like 2 through 4 position. I think they have so many guys. Like, I think I like Hunter Tyson more than most people. But talking about the draft, another sort of maybe hope I have is like, if you could move on from, like, if you're bringing in a backup point guard and that means you're not going to play Jalen, whether I like him or not, him, Hunter, they are on cost controlled contracts, and if somebody else wants them or could use those, I'm sure the Suns could use Hunter Tyson. I'm sure they'd like him. He's better than Bol Bol. Like, they just need playable guys. And it's not like I'm high. I like Hunter a lot. I think he does a lot of like the off ball movement things that I really like to see them do more of, engage with more of. But yeah, there are so many guys ahead of him, and especially if you're bringing in a veteran like a Gordon Hayward, I don't see him playing. So yeah, y'all could trade some of those guys, some of those bottom of the roster guys. I'd be okay with that.
CP, I got a question for you. Have you done much work on Micic on Charlotte? Because obviously a lot of the Serbian Nuggets fans want us to trade for him.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd be an upgrade over Reggie Jackson. I mean, chemistry, obviously they'd have it right away, but I don't know if that's moving the needle at all.
Yeah, I think I maybe in the regular season that'd be okay, but I just think they just need like a defensive point guard in the backcourt. I just think with Bruce, like that was just a huge void in the playoffs. There was no guy that could play beside Murray who was a defender as well as a playmaker. And Micic provides one of those things as a playmaker, but defensively, I just think he'll get rocked, and he can't play next to Murray. So that's tough. It's tough. Like, it's going to be a tough offseason, I think, especially if KCP leaves.
Yeah.
I just think the options are kind of limited. But, if he's back, I really like the Nuggets' chances again. But even if Brown kind of stays in as a starter, I think they'll be okay. But it's going to be tough with like the options that they have right now. Very limited. They have to get lucky, just like they did with Bruce. So I'm kind of curious to see who they kind of go after. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the draft's going to be really interesting because a lot of times what you'll see is, small market teams will kind of make their moves like before everything's available, like in free agency. So it actually wouldn't surprise me if the Nuggets make a trade on draft night that brings in a player that like we haven't even talked about, right? Because it's like now we're in the age of so many people are like mapping everything out and doing pods and writing articles about like realistic, trades and signings. But it's pretty much all been point guards and and backup centers. Maybe Booth is like goes out and trades for a shooting guard, because he knows he can't keep KCP, and then that would be like the writing on the wall. So I'm not saying that's like plan A. I'm just saying like expect the unexpected, right? I mean, if you go back to 2017, the whole, Mitchell, what's the kid from Syracuse name? Debacle.
Tyler Lydon.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen on draft night. Hopefully it's not like a repeat of 2017, but
yeah,
it's going to be an interesting draft. Everybody says it's very bad, but there are a lot of good role players in this draft. There's a lot of interesting big guys. I mean, Sarr probably goes first. Klingon will be a top 5 pick. But then you got like Edie, Holmes, and Filipowski all sort of like, I think if you look at 10 teams, 10 different, they'd probably have like 10 different draft slots for those guys. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I would think Filipowski would be great for us if he slides. I have no idea if Edie's going to slide or if he would even like fit or if we'd want him. But I'm just fascinated to watch because the draft's going to be unpredictable again.
Yeah, no, it should be fun. That Wednesday night I'm gonna do a space, so if you guys want to join, co-host,
Oh, hell yeah.
I'll do one for that night. I might go to the draft, but I probably won't. I got work obligations. But
is it in New York?
Yeah, I'll definitely host a space. Yeah, it's at Barclays.
Okay.
Yeah. Last draft I was at was in 2018 for MPJ, so maybe I'll bring some luck again
Ooh.
if I go. Yeah. So
And hopefully they don't draft any of his brothers.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're in
guys
the. I don't
buy
think
the
they're in
idea
the
that this
spot.
could be an easy draft to move up in.
Yeah.
I think it's
Sorry.
easier. I think. Yeah, no, I think
You
it's
guys
easier to move up in this class just because like the top of the draft isn't as good. Would I be willing to if I'm Denver or somebody? Probably not, unless like they can move one of their older like bench pieces. But I don't know. But I wouldn't be willing to do. I wouldn't pay capital to do it in this class.
Would you? You said you want a defensive point guard. Should the Nuggets draft Bronny James?
Man, they're setting him up for failure. That's all I'll say for now. It's terrible.
What if he's good? How funny would that be?
He's got a chance to be a rotation guy, but I mean, they're acting like he's going to be, he's like picking destinations now and stuff, and it's just
right
crazy.
Shutting down workouts.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think if he's just a solid NBA player, that will be the most boring thing in the world.
Yeah.
For like for the people talking about it, I think they're eager for him to either be amazing or, which is not as likely, or like terrible.
I mean, his play style is basically like Patrick Beverly without the annoyingness.
Yeah,
it's a good comp.
Maybe. I don't like Patrick Beverly. I would be.
If you want a drama-free Patrick Beverly, there you go. I'd be so mad if we signed Beverly. Oh my god, I'd be so mad.
I mean, he is a veteran.
Booth doesn't like short guys, so well, other than Pickett, I guess. So I'm not too worried about it.
He could be a Malone guy.
The Pickett was a Penn State pick because he went there
for sure.
And he was kind of strutting his stuff after he won the finals, which again I can't blame him. He won the first finals in Denver history, so could kind of do what he wants after that. But he took the chance and he had to take him. So I can't hate on it. If I was the GM, I'd probably do something similar.
Is Monte a free agent this summer?
Yeah, I think he's washed, unfortunately.
That's crazy. He's in his 20s.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think the injury kind of got up to him now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked at the list the other day. I mean, there's really like a couple of guys. That's about it. In the point guard section, like Dunn, Wright. I haven't really seen anybody else, honestly, but those are like the two top guys.
Yeah. My favorite stat about Chris Dunn is he was drafted ahead of Jamal Murray.
Yeah. I actually met Chris Dunn in Providence at a game. I went to go see him play. Because my cousin went there at the time. And I had like met him like at the game. It's pretty cool, man. He's a Nugget a year later. That'd be something.
A lot of good basketball in Providence. They always have good crowds.
Yeah, no, for sure.
That's fair. Before we wrap, I guess kind of a little comment question. CT, any news on any rumors on the draft this year?
No, nothing yet. Nothing yet. With just the Holmes kind of aspect. Still waiting to hear back some stuff about that, but we'll see.
I'm
It's like
curious.
my
It
one
makes some
draft
sense.
note that I've ever gotten as far as like information. I just I just never been someone to be like
Yeah,
get stuff like from people. Like I don't know. I just never like kind of felt like appealing for that for me. But I don't know if they're gonna like volunteer the
yeah,
information and
I
like say,
understand.
hey, this is what's going on. I'll be like, okay, I guess that's cool. I kind of like the suspense still on draft night of like seeing who they take. But
Yeah,
The Kings are shopping 13 for a win now piece.
Mr. Najee,
Oh, can KCP sign? Can he be sign and traded? Like, if you're a
I don't
contender,
know if
can
you
you
can do
sign and
sign and
trade,
trades if
or
you're in the first apron.
can Denver sign and trade KCP to that contender? Is that a thing?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
We'll
The
have to
one
ask
thing
Dom.
that I am kind of mad about is the Pistons firing Mr. Weaver. Now that takes away a destination for Zeke Naji because he needs all of his bigs on the team with Wiseman and Stewart and
Yeah,
Duran, and now with Zeke would have been the perfect guy, and now he's gone. So what do we do?
Oh man.
That takes out a destination.
I wish the best for Zeke. Yeah, it
I
would be
agree.
nice
I
if somebody wanted him, you know,
Do we want to get any finals
because
predictions in?
man, I want to take the Celtics, but I feel like they're gonna choke. So I'm gonna go Dallas. Dallas in 6.
That's my pick as well. Mavs in 6. They're on a heater right now, man. They're clicking.
Oh, yep.
I I don't want to.
Oh, there he is.
I know
Stage
what I
right?
want to happen, but I don't want to speak anything into existence.
All
So
right.
I'm gonna say my hot prediction right now is that Jamal Murray comes back in the best of his life. Jamal, if
Oh,
you're listening to this, please, I'll bake you cookies. I'll bake you one cookie. You can't have more than one.
he
But
doesn't need any cookies.
yeah, that's about it for me.
I just want to get one
Yeah,
last
to kind
take
of
on
maybe
record.
I guess close us out if we're good on takes and such though. Okay.
I think Peter had one more thing.
Yeah. If the Mavs win the finals, Luka will most likely win Finals MVP. Can you imagine how mad Stephen A. and Kendrick Perkins are going to be if 2 back-to-back European dudes win Finals MVP? Oh.
No. I mean, I'm sure ESPN will be excited
Did you know
because the
Stephen A.
confidence.
hasn't voted Jokic MVP any of the last 4 seasons? Not one.
He shouldn't even get a vote.
That's pretty embarrassing.
I love that for him.
Like that's actually embarrassing.
I mean, look, if ESPN is the worldwide leader in sports, Stephen A. is a worldwide leader in conflict. So I think
He got
it's
owned today, by the
not
way, on
really
First Take
embarrassing
by
at all.
Monica
That's
McNutt.
his
It's a
job.
great clip. Highly recommend it.
Good. I mean, I feel like that's.
Good.
I'm sure he's doing well. I mean, yeah, like, yeah, but that. I mean, I hope it's a civil discourse. I don't think it will be, but that's part of the game, I think.
Never is.
It definitely won't be.
But yeah, I appreciate if you made it this. Right. If you made it this far on the show, I appreciate you listening. You can find me online at Rayvon Hackshaw, Peter at Bucketsons88, and CT at CT Fazio 24. Definitely check out the articles that I will have in the description of this video, and politely ask Jarrett to insert in the description of our podcast audio links. Yeah, we appreciate you stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and go Cancun!